Picture this. The lights dim, the curtain rises, and the world holds its breath. For nearly a century, Hollywood was not just an industry, it was a god. A glittering, all-powerful empire that decided which stories got told, which stars were born, and which dreams made it to the silver screen. From the golden age glamour of Audrey Hepburn to the thunderous blockbusters of Steven Spielberg, Hollywood commanded attention like nothing else on earth. Packed theaters, roaring crowds, red carpets soaked in flashbulbs and fame. Studios held absolute power over entertainment, dictating schedules, controlling distribution, and owning the audience completely. If Hollywood did not greenlight your story simply did not exist. But every empire, no matter how magnificent, carries within it the seeds of its own disruption. Something was coming, something quiet, something small, something that nobody in those gilded boardrooms took seriously. And that was their greatest mistake. In 1997, while Hollywood was celebrating billion-dollar box office records and Blockbuster was operating nearly 10,000 stores worldwide, two men named Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph were quietly building something in a modest California office. Their idea was almost laughably simple. Mail people their movie rentals in little red envelopes. No late fees, no driving to the store, just a disc arriving at your doorstep. Blockbuster barely noticed. Hollywood certainly did not care. Why would they? This was a tiny startup competing against an empire. But underneath that unassuming red envelope was a dangerous question being asked for the very first time. What if entertainment could come to you, entirely, on your own terms? Nobody in those gleaming studio boardrooms understood what was quietly being planted. Nobody saw what was coming next. Then came 2007, and everything changed with a single click. Netflix quietly launched its streaming service, and almost nobody in Hollywood took it seriously at first. But audiences did. Suddenly, millions of viewers had instant access to thousands of movies and television shows, available anytime, anywhere, without leaving their couch. No late fees, no driving to a store, no waiting for a disc in the mail. Just pure, effortless entertainment on demand. The convenience was almost intoxicating. Families canceled cable subscriptions. Young viewers stopped scheduling their evenings around broadcast television. The remote control was no longer enough. People wanted total control over what they watched and when they watched it. Slowly but surely, traditional viewing habits began to crack. Hollywood barely noticed the tremor beneath its feet. But the ground was already shifting, and there was no going back from this quiet, revolutionary moment. Then came the move that changed everything. In 2013, Netflix did something no one in Hollywood expected. It greenlit House of Cards, a high-budget political drama starring Kevin Spacey, produced entirely in-house, and released all at once on its platform. No pilot testing, no network approval, no traditional gatekeepers. Just data. Netflix had analyzed millions of viewing patterns, search behaviors, and user preferences to determine, with remarkable precision, that this exact type of show would succeed. They knew their audience better than Hollywood ever had. Studio executives initially laughed it off, but the show became a cultural phenomenon, earning Emmy nominations and proving that a streaming service could produce prestige television. The laughter stopped quickly. For the first time, Hollywood felt genuinely threatened. Netflix was not just distributing content anymore. It was creating it, owning it, and delivering it directly to audiences worldwide, completely bypassing the system that had controlled storytelling for nearly a century. Then came the moment that permanently rewired how audiences experienced stories. When Netflix dropped the entire first season of House of Cards all at once, it did not just release a show, it unleashed a cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, viewers were no longer slaves to the weekly schedule. No more cliffhangers stretching across 7 agonizing days. No more missing an episode because life got in the way. Audiences could consume an entire season in a single weekend, and millions did exactly that. The term binge-watching entered everyday vocabulary almost overnight. This was not just a new viewing habit, it was a fundamental shift in storytelling itself. Writers began crafting narratives designed for marathon consumption rather than episodic patience. Traditional networks panicked. Executives who had spent decades mastering the weekly release model suddenly found their entire playbook obsolete. The audience had seized control, and there was absolutely no going back. As Netflix steadily claimed living rooms across the world, movie theaters began feeling the tremors of a seismic shift. Ticket sales, once a reliable and growing revenue stream, started their slow and painful decline. The National Association of Theater Owners reported consistent drops in annual admissions throughout the 2010s, numbers that kept theater owners awake at night. Marcus Theaters, AMC, and thousands of independent cinema owners watched helplessly as seats that once filled effortlessly sat empty on weekends. For family-owned theaters, the pain was far more personal. Generations of business, built on buttered popcorn and silver screen magic, were quietly disappearing. From small towns in Ohio to neighborhoods in London and Mumbai, beloved local theaters permanently locked their doors. These were not just buildings closing. They were community gathering places, first date memories, and childhood sanctuaries being erased from the cultural landscape forever. But the Netflix revolution did not just disrupt boardrooms and studio lots. It quietly devastated entire communities built around the magic of movies. Think about the family-owned video rental store that had served a neighborhood for 20 years, where the owner knew every customer by name and recommended films like a trusted friend. When streaming arrived, those stores did not just close, they vanished almost overnight. Movie merchandise shops that thrived on theatrical releases watched their shelves go cold. Local suppliers who stocked popcorn and candy for neighborhood cinemas lost contracts they had maintained for generations. These were not statistics. These were fathers, mothers, and lifelong entrepreneurs who had invested everything into businesses tied to Hollywood's heartbeat. The disruption hit Main Street just as hard as it hit Sunset Boulevard. For countless families, streaming did not just change how they watched movies, it permanently erased the world they had built around them. The Netflix revolution did not just disrupt studios and theaters, it fundamentally transformed what it meant to be a Hollywood star. Actors who once measured success by box office numbers and studio contracts began signing enormous exclusive deals directly with Netflix. Will Smith, Adam Sandler, and Ryan Reynolds became faces of a new streaming era, their films bypassing theaters entirely and landing directly into living rooms worldwide. For some, Netflix became a career resurrection, offering creative freedom and massive paychecks without traditional gatekeepers. Adam Sandler, once dismissed by critics, found a devoted global audience through his Netflix partnership. However, not every star thrived. Without theatrical releases, some actors lost the cultural visibility that red carpet premieres and opening weekend numbers once provided. The traditional path from audition to superstardom had been permanently rerouted, leaving many navigating an industry where the old rules no longer applied and new ones were still being written. While Hollywood stars negotiated multi-million-dollar Netflix deals, an entirely different story was unfolding behind the scenes. The grips who rigged lighting rigs, the gaffers who shaped every shadow, the set designers who built entire worlds from scratch, the costume artists who stitched characters into existence, and the caterers who fed entire crews through grueling 18-hour days. These were the invisible backbone of Hollywood, and the streaming revolution hit them hardest. Netflix's production model compressed schedules, restructured union agreements, and fundamentally reduced the volume of traditional studio productions. Fewer theatrical films meant fewer crew calls, fewer shooting days, and fewer paychecks. Many seasoned professionals who had spent decades mastering their craft suddenly found their phone stopped ringing. No red carpet moment would ever acknowledge their sacrifice. The human cost behind the camera remains the most compelling and heartbreaking chapter of this entire story. But amid all the disruption and devastation, something genuinely beautiful was also happening. Netflix was quietly tearing down the velvet rope that Hollywood had guarded for over a century. Suddenly, a filmmaker from Mexico City, a writer from Seoul, or a storyteller from Dakar had a direct path to a global audience of hundreds of millions. Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, a black-and-white Spanish-language film about a domestic worker in 1970s Mexico, won the Academy Award for Best Director. Squid Game, a Korean survival thriller, became the most watched series in Netflix history overnight. Lupin, a French heist drama, captivated audiences across 70 countries. None of these stories needed a Hollywood studio's permission or approval. Netflix had accidentally created the most powerful democratization of storytelling the world had ever witnessed, giving underrepresented voices an unprecedented stage. Netflix's meteoric rise did not go unnoticed. Disney, home box office, Amazon, and Apple watched carefully, then launched their own streaming platforms in rapid succession. Disney Plus, Home Box Office Max, Amazon Prime Video, and Apple Television Plus all entered the arena within a few short years, fundamentally fragmenting the entertainment market in ways nobody had fully anticipated. Suddenly, audiences were juggling multiple subscriptions just to access the content they wanted. This fierce competition triggered an unprecedented content explosion. Studios began greenlit hundreds of original shows and films simultaneously, pouring billions of dollars into production pipelines. More content was being created than at any other moment in the entire history of entertainment. But here is where a troubling question began to quietly surface. With so many titles flooding every platform simultaneously, were audiences actually being served better stories? Or were they simply drowning in an overwhelming ocean of content where genuine quality was becoming increasingly difficult to find? But not everyone was celebrating this new world order. As Netflix began submitting its original films for major awards consideration, Hollywood's most respected voices started speaking out. Steven Spielberg argued that Netflix films were essentially television movies and had no place competing at the Academy Awards alongside true theatrical releases. Christopher Nolan, a fierce defender of the cinematic experience, echoed similar sentiments, insisting that the magic of cinema demanded the communal ritual of a movie theater. These were not simply ego-driven complaints. They represented something deeper, a genuine fear that film culture itself was being quietly dismantled. Critics warned that when everything is available instantly, nothing feels truly special anymore. The theatrical experience, once a cultural event, was being reduced to just another option in an endless scroll. Hollywood's most prestigious circles had reached a breaking point. The Netflix revolution didn't just change how we watched movies, it fundamentally restructured how they were financed and distributed. Mid-range films, those with budgets between $20 and $60 million, began disappearing almost entirely. Studios retreated toward guaranteed franchise blockbusters, leaving little room for original, risk-taking cinema in theaters. Netflix stepped into that vacuum, but with strings attached. Independent filmmakers were offered something intoxicating: creative freedom, global reach, and upfront funding without traditional studio interference. However, the fine print told a different story. Ownership of their work transferred entirely to Netflix, and long-term royalties, the financial lifeline that sustained filmmakers for generations, were stripped away. A director might reach 50 million viewers worldwide, yet never see residual income beyond their initial payment. The theatrical window, once a filmmaker's greatest revenue opportunity, was shrinking or disappearing altogether. The economics of making movies had been permanently and irreversibly rewritten. And here is where the story takes a fascinating and almost poetic turn. Netflix, the company that once brought Hollywood to its knees, is now facing its own reckoning. Subscriber numbers dropped for the first time in over a decade, sending shockwaves through Wall Street. Password-sharing crackdowns frustrated millions of loyal users. Competitors like Disney+, HBO Max, and Amazon Prime Video are fighting back harder than ever. The streaming market that Netflix created has become the very battlefield threatening its dominance. Sound familiar? It should. Because this is exactly the story Netflix once wrote about Blockbuster, about Hollywood studios, about every institution too comfortable in its own power to see the challenger approaching. The disruptor has become the establishment. The innovator now faces the innovators. The cycle of disruption does not pause for anyone, not even the company that rewrote the rules of entertainment entirely. And so here we stand, at the crossroads of tradition and transformation, watching an industry reinvent itself in real time. Netflix did not just change how we watch stories, it changed how we feel them, how we share them, and how we define the very experience of cinema. But amid all the algorithms and autoplay buttons, one question lingers like the final frame of a great film. Can anything truly replace the magic of sitting in a dark theater with strangers, hearts beating together through fear, laughter, and tears? Perhaps not. Perhaps that collective human ritual is irreplaceable. The screens may multiply, the platforms may rise and fall, and the industry will keep transforming in ways we cannot yet imagine. But the hunger for great stories, that ancient, unstoppable, deeply human need that will never stream away. It will always find its way home.